for people's background information, I manage a Facebook group and also a LinkedIn group where introverts get together and share experience. And it is actually one of the most frequently asked questions. What is the best job for introverts? And I think a lot of people get confusion when they, especially for young professionals. And recently we've noticed that even for people who've been working for 10, 15 years, they're also confused too. Like, oh, this job isn't for me. Is there a perfect job for introverts? I'm going to try that. And my answer is always, as long as you care about it, you can turn any job into the best job in the world, especially for introverts. Because introverts' energies come from within.
Hello, and welcome to episode 94 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave me a review. That would mean a lot to me. Tell a friend about the podcast. Help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Jill Chang has 15 years of international experience in diverse industries, including sports, state government, and nonprofits. She currently oversees a team spread across 23 countries and has delivered over 200 public speeches in the past 2 years. She's described as not needing a script and the Wonder Woman who makes things happen barehanded. As evidence that Jill is someone who doesn't need to follow a traditional script, she entered the sports industry as a professional sports agent at the age of 26 and successfully signed 5 major league contracts for her clients within 18 months. When she worked for the U.S. state government, she was in charge of procuring and trading projects between the U.S. and Asia. She is now devoted to international philanthropy and is a fellow of Harvard Seed for Social Innovation and was featured in Girls in Tech Taiwan 40 Under 40 in 2018. The traditional Chinese version of her book, Quiet is a Superpower, was a #1 bestseller and stayed among the top 10 bestsellers in Taiwan for 20 weeks, and she's currently the bestseller in Japan. She's based in Taipei, Taiwan with her family and regularly travels across the world to make global impact in both philanthropy and helping introverts in their career and leadership development. Well, I'm excited for my guest, Jill. Jill, welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast.
Hi, David. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Jill has written a great book for introverts. I love the title, Quiet is a Superpower, and I highly recommend this book, and we're going to get into the contents of it today. Before we do that, though, Jill, I always like to talk with people about, what was your journey? When did you figure out you were an introvert? And then how did you embrace that for the success that you've had and now writing a book like this and helping other introverts?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always one of the most quiet girls in the class, but I didn't know the word introvert at that point. I was always thought I was quiet. And I thought it was my weakness because I really envy people who could make friends quickly. They are always in the center of attention. They're likable and cheerful. So I always thought, okay, maybe I need to train myself to be someone like that. So I did. I really literally mimic whatever they say and then trying to be a different person. It worked for a little bit, especially after work. After I started working, because my career started in the sports industry, it was a very competitive and very aggressive industry. I try very hard to compete with the others with a different self. It's almost like wearing an armor to be someone else. And then one day I realized, okay, maybe this is not going to work because I spent so much time and energy on putting on the armor and pretending to be someone that I'm not, to the extent that I spent almost all my energy doing that, and I didn't have much time or effort or energy to do whatever that needs me to do at work. So that was the time that I came across Susan Cain's Quiet, the book. It was it was a life-changing book for me because that was when I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not weird. I'm not worse than the others. I'm just different. So that's when I realized, okay, I'm the introvert, and there are some strengths of introverts. Instead of trying to be an extrovert, I need to do something to really embrace myself and take advantage of the strength that I already have, and then try to use it in my work and in my life. So that was the turning point that I started to embrace myself as an introvert and start exploring my potential and possibility as an introvert.
Yeah. Susan Cain's book has been so great for so many people. It's mentioned often on this show,
Mhm.
and I highly recommend it as well. What was the message that you got from it that really was life-changing for you?
I think the idea of introvert is really new to me. Was very new to me at that time because I didn't know. I thought it was just me, like I'm the weirdo, I'm the outlier, and I need to be changed or I need to be fixed. But after reading that book, I realized, oh my gosh, there are like 1/3 of the population who are just like me, but I didn't know because I don't talk to people for my weirdness, right? And I don't talk to people very often either. So I always feel like, okay, it's my problem. I need to fix it. My life's going to be in big trouble if I don't fix myself before like 25 years old, you know? So the big message for me is like, it's really she saying in the book that you're not alone and you're not worse. You're just different. And I think that's a huge support for me because from that on, I realized that yeah, I'm just different. I'm not going to judge myself anymore because based on the others' criteria, just because I'm different than them. So yeah, that was the turning point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not something to fix. It's like we have great gifts and we're going to get into that. I'm just curious, do you remember how you happened to come across Susan Cain's book?
It was big hit in Taiwan. I think it hit one of the like top three bestsellers during that time. And when I saw the book Quiet, the title Quiet, I felt like, okay, it's me. I need to get.
That's great. So it kind of jumped out at you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. So let me just say again, so your book is Quiet as a Superpower, and the full title is The Secret Strengths of Introverts in the Workplace. And again, you give a lot of good examples in your book. And I also call them superpowers, often on this show. What are maybe a superpower or two that you have? And maybe sometimes, we're not all exactly the same. So what maybe a superpower that you've seen in others?
Yeah, I think there are definitely many, many superpowers that we have. Like being able to be quiet and listen, it's a superpower itself. But if I had to name three, I would say strategic thinking and planning. The second is deep working and analyzing, and then last, active listening. It's our best superpowers.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, what makes us introverts is that we are deep thinkers. We go into our mind more often than not. And like you, that's a gift. I value being able to think and be strategic. And we need to give ourselves some time for that or focus. When we're talking about introversion, a lot of times it's around our energy, which is very important.
Yes.
We do need to take time to recharge, but beyond that, we also need to take time to think and give ourselves that focus time that you're talking about. And so it's not just about recharging. It's like, okay, I need some time to be strategic. I need some time to get some work done, right? I need some time to dream. And sometimes it's just time to have some fun just because we might enjoy that time alone. And of course, on this show, we bust the myth that we do need people, we do like people, but we do need some time alone too.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, that's actually one of the challenges that I had growing up because I always envy people who are very fast in responding and they make connections very quickly. And I was always like, oh my gosh, how do I do that? How would they even do that? And so for me, like gathering information and processing all those information and think deeply really takes time. And it took me a while to realize that that's the thing that I need to do instead of like trying to push myself to make quick decisions or to move faster. I now rather would prefer that I prepare myself a period of time of really thinking and really preparing just to make sure the things I want to do can be done in the right way, in a proper way. So yeah, I think what you brought is like super helpful. And that was definitely one of the challenges that I had in early in my career.
Yeah, if you don't realize that, if you don't realize your gift is thinking, and often you need to take time to do it, it can make you feel different or strange. And I was much like you. It's like, all right, especially early on, like, why is that person so comfortable in these situations and I'm not? But
Yes.
the good news is we can learn to be comfortable in those situations, but understand, you know what? I'm mostly going to think before I speak, not always, but mostly. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's like, hey, I just need a minute to think about that. Or there's lots of strategies that we can use around that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, how would you say that you've gained confidence as an introvert?
Yeah, I think growing up as an introvert, we are so used to not meeting social expectations. We're too quiet, too slow, and a lot of times all we hear is that why don't you do something in that? Why don't you like that? So for me it's very normal that we have less confidence or even lower esteems. Like for example, I have readers across the world, and they are super cool people. They're professional referees for the Wimbledon. They're multinational entrepreneurs. They're higher rank military officials. All those of them are like super cool people, but they don't think they're cool. And that's where I noticed that, oh, it's not just me. Like people tend to think the others, or especially introverts, they tend to think the others are cooler. So for people like this, my advice is try very hard to look at what you have, but not what you lack. And try to be strategic with what you have and don't over compare. So this practice may not be very easy in the beginning because we tend to think that we're nothing and you want to be someone else. But if you think carefully, you would notice so many strengths that are hidden gems. So I actually have an example. So I know a politician who gives public speech all the time and can literally make friends with anyone in the world within 30 seconds, no matter it's a CEO or a vendor. He's so good at it. And I envy him so much. But there was one day I wrote an article about an issue that we both care about. He read my article and asked, how long did it take you to complete this? And my response was like, it maybe an hour or two. And he was so surprised. He looked at me and said, even if you give me 10 years, I wouldn't be able to write like you. And that really helped me to think differently because maybe things that we take for granted is actually someone else's dream, even though we envy those people. So I think for those who don't have as much confidence or who with lower esteem, I totally understand. I've been there, done that. And I also would encourage you to really look at your strength rather than your weakness.
Yeah, well said. That's a great story that you gave because, you're seeing him able to connect easily, but you really have a gift for writing. And, maybe it's even sometimes where people can partner up, where somebody might have that connection ability and someone has the writing ability, and maybe, working together could be a great thing. But we all have our strengths. And again, that's what this show is about. It's like, what are your strengths? what are your needs, and what are some strategies for success, which your book definitely goes into. And then the other thing that we always do is we bust some myths here. So,
Mhm.
what's a myth or two about introversion that you want to dispel?
Yeah, I think the first one is definitely introverts are lone wolves and not
Okay.
good team players. And the second one is that introverts are less ambitious, less aggressive, and less proactive. Yeah. Let's start with the first one. I think a lot of
Okay.
times people think introverts are lone wolves because we don't like to be in the center of attention. So, for example, during meetings, we're always sitting there quietly or sitting in the corner and not speaking too much. So people would think that, okay, you don't want to be part of the team. But based on a 10-year research that I found, 50% of the C-suite people are introverts. So it's actually a very good evidence that introverts are team players and even a good team leader. So I feel like the fact that we don't talk much is that because we're like absorbing all the information, especially during meetings or during discussions. And there are things that we can contribute in other forms. So I think that's the one thing that's the first myth that I would like to dispel a little bit.
Okay.
And the second one of introverts being less ambitious and proactive, I think it also goes back to how we work and how we think. Because we're deep thinkers, we spend time gather information, process it, minimize risk, and plan the best strategy. And it usually takes a longer time. So people would think, oh, you're hesitant, or you're not paying attention, or you don't want to do it. But it's actually totally opposite. We're spending the time because we want to do it and we want to make sure it works. So a lot of times I don't think introverts are less ambitious or less proactive or less aggressive. I just feel like it's just we have our own ways to really turn our ambitions or plans into reality. And it takes time for us to make things happen. But that doesn't mean that we're not doing anything to make it happen.
Right, right. And I think you're a great example of that. So you do work in a team that spans over 20 countries. Your book is being published in 6 countries, and you give talks all around the world. So have you found that there's a cultural aspect to introversion?
Yes, definitely yes. I notice in some cultures or some countries, it's more okay to be quiet, such as in Eastern Asian countries like Japan and Taiwan. Take my personal experience, for example. I was born and raised in Taiwan. So when I went to school, there was never a section that we need to do any of group discussions in class. Zero. So all we did was listening to lectures and take notes by ourselves. So the biggest challenge when I went to the US for my master's degree is that the professors, they graded us based on the frequency of us raising hand and asking questions or sharing feedback. And we were always asked to do a presentation or group discussions all the time. So that was very different. And even today, I also noticed that TV commercials are in very interesting examples too, for instance. So when companies trying to sell drinks to the general public, for the US companies, you would notice that, oh, a lot of the commercials emphasize more on the activeness, such as giving an amazing presentation or performing excellent in sports, or even a soccer mom driving the kids around with a big smile on her face. Whereas in Eastern Asia, even it's a drink that was very high in caffeine. The commercials are the commercials usually tend to be so much quieter and calmer. So you would see a person reflecting, enjoying the breeze, or even meditating in the commercial. So I think that's very different. And from the feedback I received from different countries, I believe there's a cultural aspect in introversion, and such cultural difference is especially impactful on people with multiple cultural backgrounds, such as Asian Americans or expats, where they come from a culture but need to live in a different culture. So it's definitely something they need to adjust.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes, in the US, definitely probably the introverts struggle a little more. So would you say in parts of the world that extroverts might struggle a little bit more?
I would guess so, but
Mm.
from my experience, for example, the countries that I mentioned, Japan and Taiwan, from what I understand, especially in the workplace, it's very westernized.
Okay.
So people expect employees or team members to be more extroverted and more
Okay.
expressive too. So yeah, growing up like as a kid or as a teenager, maybe it's not that tough, but after graduation, after you enter the workplace, I think the criteria is very similar with the as Western cultures.
Yeah, I remember the participation points like in college too, and I struggled with that. One thing I learned was that preparation, and that's a big topic that we'll talk about today, but preparation was really key for me because if I didn't prepare, I wasn't going to be able to participate fully. So, your book is definitely all about the workplace. How do we prepare for meetings and presentations so that we make sure that our voice and our great thoughts and ideas are heard as introverts?
Mm. I think for me, presentations are a lot easier because it's a highly controllable scenario. Unless someone interrupts you, you have definitely have full control until the Q&A section. And I think the key to successful presentation is, like you said, preparation. And this happens to be what introverts are great about. So we can gather information, know who you're talking to, put yourself in their shoes, and think what might interest them or what might be the information they need, and then do whatever you can to prepare and practice. You can do several rounds of dry runs, get feedback, and edit. So for me, I think 90% of the work should be done before you getting on the stage. And on the other hand, that's a very good thing for introverts because you're already 90 out of 100 even before you start talking. So given a presentation is definitely something that can be trained and practiced. For me, meetings are sometimes a little bit trickier because they are less structured and you need to find your own way to really express yourself. For introverts, it's not very easy because it usually takes longer time for us to digest information, to process them, and share feedback. And with that, I encourage introverts to prepare more in advance and follow up more afterwards. So, for example, before meetings, you can, as part of the preparation, you can ask for the agenda. You can get information of who will be there and think about your role in that meeting. Are you there to listen? Are you there to present your boss? Are you there trying to negotiate something on behalf of your department? And what are your objectives? So just keep those objectives in mind would be helpful in reaching your goal during the meeting. And also, after the meetings, usually people turn to other tasks without carefully following up. So this is the time that you can show that you care. For example, creating the follow-up list, you work with others to make sure the action items are available to the team and make sure people are on the same page. So I think for meetings, especially if you're not super comfortable in talking or contributing during the meeting, I think before the meeting and after meetings are actually a good opportunity for introverts to take advantage of and to show that we are there to contribute to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if there isn't an agenda, definitely ask for one, so you can put your thoughts together and see, is there something I need to research further? Or I'll make myself some notes like, what questions do I have? And also, what point do I really want to make and put it on the agenda for myself, kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually one of my tips too. That really helped me to stay focused in the meeting because in the meeting there are always a lot of people talking at the same time and people get distracted all the time. And for introverts, because we need to stay focused and having those agenda, your own agenda, putting down helps us to stay focused without being distracted by the others' opinions.
Yeah. And, it's really important to remember that you do have something to contribute. You do need to have your voice heard. And, as we've been talking about, sometimes you're going to notice things that somebody else doesn't notice. You're going to have an idea that no one's thought about because you've given it a lot of thought. So it's really important that our voices are heard.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
So, as we said in the bio, you've given a lot of public speeches. What are some keys to successful public speaking as an introvert?
Um, I'm gonna be very honest. I still get very
Okay.
nervous.
Okay.
So, but I feel like with all that nervous and all that tension that I have, um, I somehow find a way to still complete public speaking successfully. And I think there are three tips. One is that I would try to minimize the surprises I'll have. So I would ask for example, photos of the place, and I would ask information about the audience. So I feel like, okay, I can imagine that I'm in that venue and talking to people that I already know. So this is my way of minimizing the surprises. And the second is that I would save my energy by not socializing before the public speaking. Because a lot of times, like before you speak, people would come and exchange cards, and, they would chat with you. And for me, all those interactions are a little bit draining. And that didn't help me to focus on my upcoming presentation. So I would try very hard to avoid that. And I can do all those after I speak. And then the third, I think, is by establishing a routine for myself. For me, it usually starts with going to the bathroom, like looking at the mirror and say, okay, you can do this. You've done this before. Now this time you can also do this, saying things like that. And I have my own routines of like, I have, like, how do I have the laser pointer? How do I wear? How do I do my makeup? Stuff like that, just to make sure that I'm in my comfort zone and I can really concentrate on the presentation I'm going to give. And like I said, after if there are any opportunities, especially business development opportunities, I will do everything after I speak, and I will try to do it to try to do them one-on-one, like one-on-one follow-ups or one-on-one chats, just to make sure that I'm not drained during that event.
Very good tips. So the first one is get rid of the unfamiliar as much as you can, because that I think can give us a lot of anxiety, especially as introverts, where we're in a new situation and that can cause us a lot of anxiety. So see what the room looks like, or if you can't go there ahead of time, have pictures sent, that kind of thing. Just get familiar, look up information online ahead of time. That's really powerful. And then the before, maybe you just have to tell people, hey, I'll interact with people mostly after, and just make your needs known. And I know that's important for me. I need to get in the right space. So, Jill, I've been looking forward to this podcast. I've been looking forward to talking with you. But guess what? About an hour before, I'm just like getting in the right frame of mind. I'm not doing a lot of other things. So I'm thinking about, our great conversation. But that's important. And it's important to share that with other people. It's like, come on stage, and before that I'm not going to be available so much, but afterward. And then you also brought up, where do you thrive? And a lot of us do thrive in the one-on-one. And if we can find out what the best thing for us is, we can do good in the big environment, but one-on-one or maybe even small groups is where we often have the most success.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of times we are not, how do I put it? We're not brave enough to make our needs known, because we always put the others above ourselves. Like, oh, would it be like impolite to say that, or would it hurt somebody's heart if I don't talk to them, it always comes through my mind. And then I feel like, and I realized after like so many public speeches, I I think I am confident to say now that people, they don't care that much. So I care more about their feelings than they do. So a lot of times it's just us overthinking about their like potentially negative reactions. But the truth is they don't care that much. So yeah, I totally echo with your perspective of our really make ourselves needs known to everyone, and make sure that we have the opportunity to express ourselves, and for people to have the opportunity to know what works best for you and for everyone.
And part of it is everybody doesn't need what we need. And so that's why we have to let people know, because some people are going to just totally work the room before the speech, and that works for them. I had a guest
Yes.
on, Richard Newman, that wrote "You Were Born to Speak," and one of his strategies, because he needed the same thing like you and I do, where some time before the speech, and he said he'd bring an extroverted person from his company, and they would kind of take on that. And I thought that was really good advice. But again, it's having some strategies, knowing what works for you.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'll take that. Thanks.
Yeah. So you write a lot in your book about leadership as an introvert. And again, that's another myth. Introverts can be amazing leaders. We just need to get to know ourselves, and like we're talking about what we need. So how can an introvert be an effective leader?
Mhm. I think first, introverted leaders are very focused. A lot of the extroverted leaders tend to have SOS, or shiny object syndrome, in which they tend to chase new objects because they seem more interesting, while introverted leaders stay focused for a longer term. So I think that's one of the advantage. And the second is that introverts tend to put the team before themselves because we don't like to be in the center of attention. So introverted leaders tend to give more credits and space to the team members. And I think that's critical for any leader in general. And then last, I think active listening and strategic thinking. These are strengths of introverts. And with that information gathered from active listening, introverted leaders can ask questions like, why are we doing this? Or how can I better support you? And I think these would help introverts to become good leaders and more effective leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like in the book how you bring up that we need introverts and extroverts in our teams, right? As introverts, we don't just want to work with other introverts. How can you help introverts and extroverts work on a team and understand and support each other's strengths and needs, like we're talking about?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing to do is really to understand how to make the best use of each team player, how how to best communicate with them, and how to award them, because it varies individual by individual. And at the same time, I think creating an environment that meets needs for anyone in the spectrum is very important. For example, I think, yeah, for example, leaders can or managers can discuss expectations with transparency. For example, when you talk to your team member, you can say transparently, like, this role requires going to networking events. How many times a month do you think it's okay for you? So try to create that space for discussion, and show that you care with transparency. I think that's a um, good start to create a like everyone friendly environment. And the second, I think, having the flexibility is very important, because for introverts, we like to stay focused and work alone without being dispersed by meeting, without being distracted by meetings or other thoughts. So other thoughts of distractions. what I would suggest is that, for example, if in an office, I can set the meetings in the afternoon, so that, or the meetings are all in the morning, so the introverts can have 50% of the day quiet without disturbed, doing their own things. And then extroverts can have that kind of interaction and discussion during the other half of the day. I think that would be helpful to introverts, both introverts and extroverts. And then the last, I think it would be very helpful to use technology to increase people to contribute. Based on the research, if there are over 6 people in a meeting, 60% of the talking will be made by only 2 people. So with that, I think it's very important to include all your team members to express what they think. But sometimes it's not very easy for introverts, as you know. So, for example, you can use post-its during meetings or using shared document before meetings to make sure that each team members, they have a way to express themselves rather than having to really standing up and speaking up.
Wow. I relate to that statistic. I haven't seen that research, but I've experienced it where you're saying that there is a couple people that tend to dominate, and we do need to
Mhm.
figure out ways so that everybody's voice is heard for sure.
Yeah.
So you've been working remotely for quite some time, leading an international team before the pandemic. I started working remotely for the pandemic, and that was my first time. There was definitely things I enjoyed, and but there was also some things that maybe were some misconceptions about introversion, and that everybody, all introverts are just going to love working remotely. What are some things to think about? There's definitely going to be people that are going to continue to work remotely, but also there's a lot of hybrid. Like I'm in a hybrid environment where I'm going into the office a couple days a week and working from home. So what are some things for introverts to think about as maybe they're continuing to work remotely, or maybe they're now in a hybrid environment?
Mm-hmm. I think it's mostly, especially for introverts, it's mostly about managing our energy and also think about your career plan. I I know some companies or some industries are, they highly encourage people to go back to the office. So if you're in those companies or industries, the price of choosing working remotely is higher than the others. So just consider what works best for you. I've been remote working for many years, and this is my comfort zone. I feel like I work more efficiently. I've found a way to balance my work and life, and I really enjoy the flexibility. But also, like you, David, I also found some negative impacts. For example, my physical activity level dropped significantly after working
Yes,
from home.
yes, I relate to that.
Right. And then also I don't have enough in-person interactions with people, to the extent that sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, I couldn't talk as I used to. It's like my brain is getting slower, my mouth is getting slower. So and then I started to reflect, okay, maybe I enjoy remote working, but I really need some improvements in like adding more physical activities into my daily life and having like strategically planning things for me to have this in-person interactions, whether it's with friends, with a client, or with family. I need to really see people in person and talk to them in person. So I think you brought up a great misconception that introverts are all suitable for remote working. It's really not the case. We need interactions as well, and we need interaction with the world too. And the level differs from people to people. So I feel like it's more about really thinking what you need and what would works the best for you. And I think during COVID, we've all worked remotely to some extent. So I think we all know a little bit of what it's like. And it's really helpful to make careful evaluation and find out what works the best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started working remotely, my wife has always worked remotely. And then I have 3 kids, and then all of a sudden, all 5 of us are home all the time. We're definitely invading my wife's space where she's working remotely. I have a couple kids that are now in online school that aren't really happy with it. And so it wasn't a really good way to judge, do I like this work? Because in my office, I have a door I can close. Here at home, I'm in this open office environment. So and the other thing was, I kind of missed the spontaneous conversations that occurred. Like
Yeah.
maybe you're walking to a meeting or from a meeting, or you just need to ask a quick question. You just pop over
Yeah.
somewhere. And, what I've found over the pandemic is a lot of times it's more planned. It's like you just want to just run an idea by someone. They're like, all right, we'll set up a time. And you're like, oh, I just wanted to call you. So
Yeah.
there's some definite drawbacks, but and I also know there was some very lonely introverts that were working from home and really did need that people interaction. And you got to figure that out.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Yeah, so I think what you just proposed, maybe like having a hybrid working environment, or you can have the flexibility to set your own working plans, would be really helpful. But before that, I think it's really important for us to really sit down, take a moment, and see what works best for us, what works and what doesn't work for us. And even like for me, I've been remote working, and we don't offer like in-person office working environment. So this is my only option. I like it, but I literally don't have any other options. So even if I miss the spontaneous conversation, I couldn't. But what can I do to make it happen? I think that's the growth mindset that we all need to have. Like, if I'm stuck with the only option I have for now, what can be done to make my life better, to make things work better? I think that's something that we can always think about.
Yeah, because in your case, your team spread out over several countries, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so like with me, I had a presentation that I could have joined remotely, but for me, my work is it's driving distance because that's how it always used to be. And I had
Mhm.
a choice, and I chose to go in person. But like you're saying, for most of the time, that's not a case because your team members are all spread out. And so you do need to figure out, and maybe like you're saying, maybe it is that you're getting more personal interactions outside of work, and you just need to figure all that out. Like what's the best with the situation that you have.
Exactly.
So as we're talking about work, another thing in your book, you wrote a little story that, you were responding to a social media post where basically it was something like, what's the best jobs for introverts or something along those lines. And just what was your response to that?
For people's background information, I manage a Facebook group and also a LinkedIn group where introverts get together and share experience. And it is actually one of the most frequently asked questions. What is the best job for introverts? And I think a lot of people get confusion when they, especially for young professionals. And recently we've noticed that even for people who've been working for 10 15 years, they're also confused too, like, oh, this job isn't for me. Is there a perfect job for introverts? I'm gonna try that. And my answer is always, as long as you care about it, you can turn any job into the best job in the world, especially for introverts, because introverts energies come from within. So if you care about it from within, it's not about like the title or the pay or the recognition that you receive, but it's more about what you really care about. Is it consistent with your philosophy of life? Is it consistent of is it consistent with your personal beliefs? And I think those factors are really especially important for introverts, because if we found the drive from within, that's where our energies come from. So I wouldn't say there's any type of job that are the best or the worst for introverts. It's basically up to each of you, like what's best for me isn't necessarily the best for you, right? So I think to begin with, I think having like taking the time to dig within and to really find out what you care about, that's very important, I think, especially for introverts.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I get the question a lot too. And it's really, I think most jobs could be done by an introvert or extrovert, but their approach might be different. Like
Exactly, yeah.
like sales is a big, oh, introverts can't do sales. Well, I actually don't want to do sales, but if I did, I could be very successful, but it would look different from an extroverted salesperson, you know?
Exactly. Yes, yes, exactly. I think as an introvert, we all need to have the mindset of make twisting things a little bit to make it work for us. And like you say, sales are the most probably one of the most challenging areas for introverts to step in. But I encountered like a tons of people who are very successful, even like top sales in their companies, and they're all introverts. They came to my speech and they said, "Oh, thanks to your book, and actually, I'm an introvert, but I'm top sales. I want you to share my stories with my fellow introverts." And I was very surprised because I as an introvert, I never thought myself in sales or any position in sales, but people like me, they did it and they want me to share their stories. So I think that's going back to what you said. It's more about finding your way to make things happen. Like, no matter what industry or what position you're in, there's always a way for us introverts to make things happen. It may look very different, but that's our way.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a good way. We
Yes.
can come up with our own brilliance that way.
Yes.
So Jill, as an introverted leader, how do you find your quiet time?
Um, for me, I try to do a 30 to 60 minutes of morning yoga every day. That's one of my quiet time. And also books are always my best shelter. I would grab a book wherever I go. And whenever I find like 5, 10 minutes, I would just start reading. And from the moment I started reading, I feel like I'm in a different world. And I think that's the best thing about reading. So yeah, yoga and reading are definitely my quiet zones.
Very good, very good. Oh wow, we've talked about so many great things. And your book is so full of great tips. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we didn't talk about?
I think I would like to welcome people to join my LinkedIn group. It's called the Introvert Cafe, where we have people from different countries, introverts from different countries in that group, and we share professional workplace challenges and tips, and people can connect and share experience. So I think that's a good place for people to just to hang out.
Very cool. And I will put that in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
I highly recommend Quiet is a Superpower. Where can people get your book?
It's online. And if you want more information about me, I have my website is injill.com, injill.com, where you can find all the information about me. Yeah, and I have work across different countries, but the website is in English. So yeah, so I think
All
that's
right.
the best place.
Well, thanks again, Jill. This has been a wonderful conversation, and quiet is a superpower.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the pleasant talk.
Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts, links to social media, and other items. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code. I'll add a link to the show notes. There's so many great things about being an introvert, so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.